Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Dattitude podcast. Where you at, New Orleans? It is our first Dattitude of the season without the Saints playing. That's a little depressing to some. Others are happy it's over. Jeff Duncan's here with me. He can tell me whether he's depressed or happy.
I don't know if I'm either one. I'm still in a fog, man. Usually, the end of the year, I get sick. I'm happy I avoided getting sick this time.
I did not. It happened to me. I got sick the day before New Year's Eve, and I'm just now starting to feel like myself again. So it is what it is.
It happens. Yeah, I think your immune system gets worn down over the course of the year.
It knows when it's almost over.
I know. And then there's also a lot of crud going around. So
yeah, well, and I know a lot of cruddy people. So I just run into them.
Me.
Yeah, well, I don't think I bumped into you in a little while. We've done a lot of virtual stuff. I don't think I've seen you in a little bit. All right, well, let's talk football because I know you got a lot going on this morning, hence why we're at 8:15 instead of 9:15, and we appreciate you that you're joining us this morning. Like Jerry here. Good morning, Jerry. You can join us here. You can be part of the show. You can leave your comment or question here for Dunk or myself, and we'll put it on the air here. Jerry says it still sucks that the Saints aren't part of the playoffs. Let's jump right into the Saints stuff because I'm not so sure that it – I mean, I don't want to sound the wrong way, but I think it's kind of a good thing this year that this team – last year, I really wanted them to make the playoffs. I thought they fought hard. They deserved to be in it. And this year, I think it's a good thing maybe they're not in it. Maybe they need to realize that they can't keep going status quo. They need to make some changes.
Well, I think, we talked about it before, the fact that the NFC South was just so winnable this year. It was so bad.
Yeah.
That I think that masked a little bit of how bad the team was because everyone kept having hope that they were going to make the playoffs. So I agree with you. I think in my column I wrote a few days ago was addressing the offseason. I think they have to be very harsh in their critique and evaluation, they being Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen, the rest of the brain trust. They have to take a real hard look at this roster and coaching staff and not get deluded that they were one game away from the playoffs because, I mean, that was a fluke. I mean, the Bucs are terrible, and everyone else in the division is pretty bad. And as I wrote, JD, and people probably won't agree with me, but the Saints are closer to the bottom of the league than they are the top. And I think
there's no question.
Yeah, and I think people think, we almost made the playoffs. Well, that was a fluke year. Any other year, you'd have been out, before the start of December. So I think that's more realistic.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's funny though. You say that, and would it really surprise you if it's kind of like a wounded animal with Tom Brady, right? We don't know how much further he's going to go. I know everyone's saying he's going to play somewhere next year. I'm not so sure. I think that he might ride out into the sunset when this has been a really trying year for Tom Brady. He's 45 years old.
There's like a real attractive option out there that kind of gets him excited. But I don't think he's going back to Tampa. No way.
I think there's zero chance he's going back to Tampa. But so that being said, would it surprise you at all if, like I said, like a wounded animal? I mean, they have the receivers, they have the offensive weapons. I know their offensive line has been kind of bad. Their defense has been hit or miss. But would it surprise you if they went out? I think they're going to win this week. I think they're going to win Monday. And I know that a lot of Mabel and Mabel's with you don't see that. You think that?
No. Well, look, if Dak Prescott implodes, I guess it's possible. To me, this game comes down to one thing, and that is, does Dallas come to play? And I think everyone's talking about the one thing would worry me a little bit is that Dak Prescott chokes. I mean, really, that's to me, that's the only way they can lose.
What about your friend Mike McCarthy?
I think Mike McCarthy's a great coach.
I know you do.
I've never bought into this thing about him not being good. He won a Super Bowl. He's got like the.
You think he's a great coach because he was here as an OC when you came here? Well,
I mean, he won
and he was nice to you.
Won a Super Bowl in Green Bay. He made the Saints offense. To me, he's the one that brought the Saints offense into the modern era, even before Sean Payton and Drew Brees. I mean, they had dynamic offenses under Mike, and he made Aaron Brooks into a viable NFL quarterback.
I agree.
As soon as Mike left the Saints and went to San Francisco to coach for Mike Nolan, Aaron Brooks' production dropped off a cliff. He was awful. And so you have to give Mike McCarthy a lot of credit for that. I think he made Aaron Brooks into somebody you could win with. And then he went to, I think he has to get a lot of credit for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, no one wants to give him any credit. It wasn't like Aaron Rodgers came into this league as a number 1 overall pick or anything. He was, a lot of teams passed on him. He came in kind of raw from Cal and had been a junior college quarterback at one time. So I think he developed him there and should get credit for that. They won a Super Bowl, and now he's gone to Dallas, and they're winning at much higher level than before he got there. So I don't know, at some point, people have to start giving him credit, or it's not fluke.
But
I don't see Green Bay. I don't see Green Bay winning better, than when he left. I mean, they didn't even make the playoffs this year. Well,
they lost a lot. But haven't we seen? And I'm just a question. Haven't we seen great coordinators turn out to be mediocre or less than mediocre head coaches?
Yeah. But I think Mike,
here in New Orleans.
Yeah, but the thing that Mike has, and that's the thing that separates him, is he's got that big picture vision. I mean, social media in this modern era, there's so much groupthink, and people tend to just think whatever they read on social media, and somehow or another, people have started to just make fun of Mike McCarthy. They act like he's this blithering idiot. I mean, he's a very sharp guy, and there's a reason that Jerry Jones and them hired him. I mean, he's got respect around the league, in the coaching community, in the front office community. He knows what he's doing. Trust me. And it's not by accident that they're winning at a high level. I mean, I think they've won 12 games, 13 games or something the last 2 years.
They won 12-5 this year.
Right. Now, look, everybody killed him last year because they lost to the 49ers. 49ers were good last year. 49ers went to Green Bay.
You're good this year.
Green Bay. So,
But let me ask you, though. When have I been accused of going with just groupthink? I'm just, you've known me for a long time.
I know. Well, I'm just saying social media in general, like somehow or another, and I don't even know why I pay attention to it, but somehow or another, I read a lot about McCarthy, and they don't. People have no clue, man. They have no clue about him. Sean Payton's a good example. Sean is a very harsh critic of other coaches.
Yeah,
he doesn't think a lot of other coaches are really good. Because Sean is really good, and he really respects Mike McCarthy, and that says a lot to me because he knows who's good and who's not.
Here's the thing, though. I'm not necessarily trashing on Mike McCarthy as much as I know how Jerry Jones works, and I said this earlier in the week. I'm going to say it again. I could see if Dallas loses this game, whether Mike McCarthy is a great coach, an average coach, or a below average coach. I'm not passing judgment on him because I don't know the answer. I'm with you. Social media is easy to jump on Mike McCarthy. They have a lot of talent, and let me tell you though, Dak Prescott is not going forward in his career. He is not playing better than he played a year or 2 years ago. He's just not. So with that being said, though, if they lose this game, it would not surprise me at all if Mike McCarthy gets fired and they try to bring Sean Payton in there.
Well, that's obviously a possibility. Jerry Jones did say this week he would not do that. Now, I know maybe in the motion of losing a game, he could do it, but he did come out and specifically say that wouldn't happen.
Right. He said a lot of things before.
I know. I'm just saying. I mean, he literally addressed that exact thing. He said he's got a much bigger evaluation. I don't think they're going to lose to Tampa. I do think it's a no-win situation for the Cowboys. No win. I mean, you got to go on the road and play Tom Brady a home game, and you've accomplished way more this year than Tampa did.
I don't want to give away my best bet, which is coming up later with Uncle Big Nick, but I do think it's going to be a close game. I'm not necessarily predicting Tampa to win, but I think it's going to be a really tight game. And I will tell you this. I will take if I got to pick between Tom Brady, a wounded animal, in what could be his final game of his career, not playing. I mean, if you tell me whether Tom Brady's going to play excellent or poorly, and those are my only two choices, I'm picking excellent because I'm telling you, I know fans are talking about where he's going next year, and it sounds like you agree with me. I think it's at least 50-50 he doesn't play next year. At least 50-50. And I agree with you. I think it's got to be the right scenario. He's not going to just pick up and go somewhere. I know everybody thinks he's going to go to Vegas or whatever, and maybe he will. But he's not going to just go somewhere just to go somewhere. It's got to be the right scenario. He's got to think he has a good offensive line, a really good offensive line. He's got to think he's got the right coach I guess Josh McDaniels would fit into that because he's worked with him before. But it's anything but a fait accompli that Tom Brady plays next year. I want to get back to the playoffs in just a moment, Dunk.
Okay.
But I do want to talk a little bit about the Saints because I think it's important. I got to say, I said last week, or maybe I said it Monday, I don't remember which show I said it on, that I would be surprised if Pete Carmichael made it through the first week of the offseason without either saying he was stepping down from his position or the Saints making some kind of announcement. I know you're never one to like jump on somebody's got to go. So I'm interested to, I don't know that we've really talked about this, but and I'm all for Dennis Allen staying another year and seeing if he could turn this thing around and seeing what we can do, because I'm not sold that Dennis Allen's not the right person for this team to lead this team. That being said, I think Pete Carmichael needs to be removed from that position. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. What do you say about that?
Well, I know a lot of people feel the same way. I'd say a couple things. One, Mickey Loomis came out this week on his radio show and said, no, really going to be no decisions this week. They gave the whole coaching staff off except for Dennis Allen. Yeah. So he and I'm sure Jeff Ireland, Kai Harley, Mike Parrington, Dennis, they're meeting. But any decisions on the coaching staff, I don't think will be announced till next week just because the coaches aren't going to be there. So that doesn't surprise me after hearing that, obviously. That's how Mickey works. Mickey said he wanted to kind of let the emotion of the season dissipate before they start really grinding the roster and coaching staff decisions.
Right.
I think that's classic Mickey Loomis. He's very calculated and takes his time on those things. So next week, I think we might start hearing some stuff. I still think they might take their time on that, Jim, because here's what I think will come out of those meetings. And this is just me speculating, but I think there's going to – and I think this needs to happen. I think they need to come to a real strong decision on what direction they want to go on offense. I think one of the problems, Dennis Allen might admit this, they inherited kind of this coaching staff in a way, and they decided they couldn't find an outside offensive coordinator they liked. So basically – Pete Carmichael, for the team, if you will, decided I'll do it and keep the Sean Payton system, the Sean Payton system intact. I'm not sure that's the right move going forward, and I'm not sure it was the right move back then. I understand why they did it, but it didn't work out because Dennis Allen is a different head coach than Sean Payton was. I mean, Dennis Allen manages this team more like Jim Mora than Sean Payton.
No question.
Very conservative. They lean on their defense and special teams. I get that. That's the kind of team you're going to be. Then you might want to marry up an offensive philosophy that goes with that defensive philosophy. And I think maybe that's what they need to do this offseason, figure out what they want to be on offense. Do they want to be more like a Ravens type of team, which is what they seem to be like? And if you do that, then maybe you bring in a different kind of offensive coordinator, and then you marry up what your quarterback is to that offense. And so I think that might be what comes out of these meetings over the next few weeks.
That makes complete sense to me. That's actually the most logical explanation that I've heard about any of this. It makes a ton of sense to this. And if you think about it, really, the Saints really never had an identity this year. I mean, right. Especially on offense. And you go back and forth. I think they finally got one on defense. That they were maybe if you look at it, this first half of the year, Dunk, I think they spent so much time trying to figure out who they were on offense that the defense kind of suffered. And then once Dennis Allen said, you know what, I'm taking this defense over, we're going to do things my way, the way that we've been doing it, they turned back into that top 6, top 7 kind of defense, but yet the offense was still floundering. So I agree with you if you figure out who you are on offense, but they still have to – whoever comes in and is the OC of this team, Dunk, I really think needs to be more of a commanding presence. Like a Mike McCarthy. I mean, I know it's not going to be Mike McCarthy.
I know what you mean, like a head coach of the offense.
Exactly. And the Saints have had that a lot lately. I mean, if you think about it, before Sean Payton, they did have Mike McCarthy. And Jim Haslett was like this defensive guy and this strong-willed guy who was kind of in charge of the defense and let Mike McCarthy do his thing on offense. Right. And that's why the Saints, people can joke about Aaron Brooks all they want. But I think the Saints' offense was pretty darn good then. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was pretty good.
It was top 10 almost every year.
It was efficient. It was efficient. And so I think if the Saints can get back to that sort of thing and realize what fans have to realize is this team doesn't have to be Sean Payton's team anymore. And I think you're right. I think Mickey and I think even Dennis to some extent didn't know how to put his personality on this team. And I think he started to figure that out a little bit the second half of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think that could be what comes out of this. And it's an easy transition from Pete Carmichael. I wouldn't be surprised if Peyton takes a job somewhere if he brings Pete with him. Yeah. I mean, personally, I know, the Carmichaels have lived over on the North Shore this entire time. Their kids have grown up here.
That is Dennis Allen.
Yeah, I know. So I think he would prefer to stay here just because they have kids. They want to uproot them. But I know Pete's son is coaching baseball over in the San Antonio area. So I think staying here would be his preference, but I'm sure he's going to have options if he does move on. And Sean Payton, I don't think that's going to be the only coach that Sean will look to poach. I think there's going to be some other guys that he coached with that he's going to make offers to. And I think he's going to maybe bring Jeff Ireland with him, and that would be a huge loss. If the Saints were to lose Jeff Ireland, I don't know if they've got anybody in the building who can replace him.
Look, I don't have any problem at all with Pete Carmichael staying here. I think I think the way he worked with Drew Brees and he and Drew worked together, I think was fantastic. I know that he had a lot of Sean Payton probably rubbed off on him, and he's fine. He's just not a play caller, which is okay.
Well, here's the other thing, though. I mean, I think he's getting a little too much criticism. I mean,
I don't.
Yeah, they're playing with two backup quarterbacks. Their offensive line was a mess all year.
There was no consistency.
Those are the two most important things on the roster. They lost Mike Thomas. He basically didn't play all year. I think there was a drop off, no question, a drop off with Andres Pete. I don't think he's going to be back. It wasn't quite all there for him. I think a great offensive coordinator like a Sean Payton would have overcome it, but I don't think it's all Pete Carmichael. I don't think it's going to be this magic wand and you bring in a new offensive coordinator and everything's going to be fine, because I think they've got some personnel issues they got to address. And first and foremost at quarterback, the most important position.
I don't deny that part at all, but what I saw was complete inconsistency and not using the strengths that you have and not realizing when you were supposed to use certain strengths. I mean, I'm just a sports writer who is watching TV, and I know that you didn't utilize Taysom Hill enough in the right spots, I guess, per se. I'm not going to get into the whole Andy Dalton versus Jameis Winston thing, because in the grand scheme of things, it might not have mattered. But when you're talking about, when to use Kamara, when to use your running game, I think you're spot on about the Jim Mora type philosophy, and that this offense probably would have been better served to use that kind of offense. And if you think about who the Saints had back then, I mean, Bobby Hebert, people can talk about whatever they want. He was no great quarterback. I mean, he was nothing special. The Saints didn't have fantastic receivers, but they had a good running game, and they knew how to use the running game. They had really good tight ends. They knew how to get around the edges, and they knew how to do just enough to make it so it wasn't left in Bobby Hebert's hands. And I think that's where Dennis and the next offensive coordinator need to be. And as far as play calling goes, I just think they were too inconsistent on the way Pete called games. I think he also got better towards the back half of the season, the final, I guess, after the Tampa Bay game. And not just because they won games, not just because they had a winning streak going. I think he started to figure things out a little bit. But I think that last game was kind of a microcosm, Dunk. You go out and you go right down the field and you score against the Carolina team that was down and done and just didn't care. And then you just spit the bit and you don't show up. The Saints had a reason to go out and win that game. And it was to finish the season on a 4-game win streak and take some of that stink off. And yet they go down the field and score and disappear. That's all kind of a microcosm.
In his defense, though, guy missed a field goal.
You missed 2 field goals. That's 6 points.
Star receiver fumbles on the 30. That's not Pete Carmichael. That's the offensive execution and the special teams execution that hurt this team. They didn't need to score very many points in that game to win. The way they had Sam Darnold under lock and key, but you lose a game. To me, that goes back to just the overall, attention to detail with this team, and that's something that I think is an indictment on the coaching staff overall. Is Led the league in false start penalties, led the league in defensive holding penalties. Those things all add up over the course of a year. Turnovers, they were high in that area. Giveaways, all those little attention to detail things killed this team.
Yeah, that's part of the offensive coordinator's duties, in my opinion. All right, we agree on a lot of things. In fact, we agree on most things. I'd say we probably agree about 85 to 90% of the time. We can I don't even think it's full disagreement, but we at least semi disagree. Thank you, Barry, for your comment. Dalton misses a wide open hill for a touchdown. Dalton missed a lot of things, which leads me into my next question on the Saints. And again, we only have about another 15 minutes because I know you got to run this morning. You got a meeting at 9 a.m. But I want to ask you about the quarterback situation. What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, again, you're not going to be as strong on Dalton needs to go. I don't think Dalton wants to be here, first off, anyway. I think Andy Dalton is going to either go find another team to play for or ride off into the sunset and finish and retire. That's just my opinion. I don't know
Why do you say that? I think he definitely wants to be here. Why do you
do think he wants to be here?
Yeah, I think they enjoyed. Now, look,
I think he wants to play for a winning team at this point in his career and be a backup. That's what I think.
That might be true, but I think he thinks this team could be a winning team. I think it's going to come
he definitely wants to be a backup.
I think it's going to come down to money, though, man. I mean, like, when you get late in your career, like Andy, and he's got a family. I mean, I remember just recently visiting with Scott Fujita, and if you remember, Scott Fujita left the Saints after winning the Super Bowl. And he goes, I knew I was near the end of my career. I took the money. I went to Cleveland. It was terrible, but I was thinking about my family and my future. And I think guys like that at this stage of their careers, Andy out-earned his contract. I think they paid him.
Oh, I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I think he's going to – if he comes back to New Orleans, it's not going to be for $3 million. But I think they have to get an upgrade at that position. And so he would be strictly a fallback if you went, say, in the draft with a young guy that you liked. I think you have to bring in a veteran just to kind of be the transition bridge guy. That could be Dalton. I know, look, I can tell you this. They love Andy Dalton. I mean, I don't know why, but they absolutely love him.
Well, because he kind of fits into their kind of player. But I think you need – look, we're going to talk more about this in the offseason. I don't want to spend a whole ton of time talking about this because everybody knows what I think about Andy Dalton. I like Andy Dalton as a person. I think he's an awesome dude. And just a few times that I've been around him. And not only that, I know some people who know him and say he's an outstanding dude.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I know, and he's a family guy and all that stuff. And I know he likes it here. But I just don't get the sense that he wants to be a starting quarterback. And
well, he might not be here if they go out and get somebody else. I mean, who knows what they're going to do? They've got to get creative with the cap.
100%.
I think they need to move on from Mike Thomas. I don't know if people believe that or not, but I do certainly believe it's time to move on from him. That will save them some money cap-wise. Andres Pete, I think his play dropped off precipitously. You move on from him. They've got to transition this roster and make some very difficult decisions and get back some of these 26 free. They got 26 free agents, man. Yeah. I mean, some key guys like Carl Granderson and Caden Ellis that before this season, nobody thought really much of either one of them. Now they're kind of core defensive players for this team that have a chance to earn a lot of money. And I don't know where the Saints are going to come up with the money because they're so tight against the cap. And that's where Mickey and Kai are very good. And I think they will figure out a way to get those guys. I think one of the reasons they did what they did with Mike Thomas's contract was to give them the flexibility to sign a Caden Ellis and a Carl Granderson before free agency. They do not want those guys to get to the open market.
Moving on from Michael Thomas, though, is a lot easier said than done. I know that they came up with something and it will make it easier to get rid of Michael Thomas. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy to get rid of Michael Thomas. That contract is still going to be tough to get rid of, which leads me into my scenario here. And I know the Raiders don't really need him, but what if the Raiders and Saints kind of worked out something to where, and I know Derek Carr's contract is a little bit nastier than Michael Thomas's, but if the Saints and Raiders kind of worked out something to where they traded Michael Thomas for Derek Carr?
I just don't think they need him. I mean, they got a Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams. I mean, I don't think
Devontae Adams is way better than Michael Thomas.
Well, I know. I'm just saying. And then you got.
Do you think about how good that team could even be? Because I think their O-line is okay. I think they need some improvements there as well. But man, that team on offense, especially if they're thinking about bringing in Tom Brady. I mean, you bring in another receiver like that, and they have a Mike Evans, Chris Godwin kind of situation. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's beyond. It just seems like I don't know. Maybe so. Maybe so. I mean, Hunter Renfro's there as their slot guy. They like him, I know.
Scotty Miller is Hunter Renfro.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could see Mike Thomas going a lot of places. I'll be surprised if they're able to trade him. I think they're going to end up having to release him.
Yeah, they might.
Maybe somebody out there, like I've always thought that New England, they need help at receiver.
Oh, yeah.
They have a history of bringing in these kind of talented but troubled guys like Thomas. And I could see Bill Belichick going, this guy in our locker room will produce, and I'll bring him in and I'll handle him. But I just think he's worn out his welcome here. I think he's, off the field, he's a handful. He's a different guy. He's very much a loner and kind of does his own thing. I mean, if you notice, he's rarely around the team. I mean, you never see him at games when he's not playing. He's just kind of his own guy. And I think at some point with these two young receivers that have emerged this year in Shaheed and Olave, you feel better about the receiving core going forward. And those guys are on rookie contracts, so they're pretty affordable. And you could just move on from Mike Thomas and maybe get something in return for him and clear some of that money off the books.
I think it was early October when I said this, that Michael Thomas has played his last down as a New Orleans Saint. I don't think he'll ever suit up wearing that number 13 here ever again. I'd be very surprised if he ever wears that jersey here again. Before we make our NFL weekend predictions, we never talked enough about Sean Payton. I have some people, you talk about social media. It's my job. I have to look at social media. Sometimes I want to bang myself in the head by reading it. I mean, back in the day when you have social media, I was way more confident about the public. I gotta say, way more confident about people that I only. Those people that
didn't have a megaphone back then.
The people that you only kind of knew, that you would see every now and then. You'd shake their hand. Maybe you have a cup of coffee with them or something, but you didn't really know them, and you realize you're probably better off because you didn't know them. Now that there's social media and some of the things these people say, but anyway. All that being aside, everyone has an opinion on what's going to happen with Sean Payton or want to happen with Sean Payton. Dunk, I still think it's 50-50 that he doesn't coach next year. I think it's 99.5% he coaches again someday. But I think it's 50-50 on whether he coaches next year or not.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, if your scenario plays out and they get rid of Mike McCarthy, I think he'll be in Dallas the next day if that happens. Yeah. I just think that's the one place that makes so much sense in so many different ways. But that said, I don't think that's going to happen. And so I think it's But
he's not going to take a bad job.
Right. It's very much a possibility that he's very happy right now at Fox, and he's enjoying that lifestyle. I know he's itching to get back on the sidelines, but not at just, at any place. It's got to be the right fit. And I don't see a great fit right now when I look at the landscape, places he's talking to. Look, he's smart. He's going to go talk to these owners and front office people and create a market for his services. That's smart business, and it doesn't hurt to talk to them. But the other side of the coin, Jim, is they have to make an offer for him, and that's something they have to consider. Back when there was that flirtation with the 49ers and Rams in 2016, both those front offices were interested in bringing Sean Payton to their coaching staff from New Orleans, but they both balked because the asking price was going to be so high in compensation, and that's a factor that no other coach they hire they have to deal with. They don't have to give up anything to get another coach, so it's a little bit of a hindrance in some ways for Sean Payton because he's got a competitive disadvantage because he's under contract with New Orleans.
Exactly. And so some of these places that have been rumored where he might go, and the three main ones that I've heard so far is, first off, I've said this 1,000 times, and I got two friends on Facebook who keep saying this, and I keep telling them, I mean, you can keep saying it if you want. It's a free country. Sean, repeat after me. Sean Payton is not going to Arizona. He will not coach for the Bidwells. He wants I could tell you Sean Payton doesn't want anything to do with the Bidwells. Not only that, they're in an awful situation where They're stuck with Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray isn't going to play until probably the end of October. So next year is a complete write-off for Arizona. They're going to be awful. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL next year. They're going to be like a 3 or 4 win team next year if they're lucky. He's not going to Arizona.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll be stunned if he goes there. Now, here's the one caveat I would say, like everything I hear, that's not going to happen. But, we've all been in this situation. We've been either on a job interview or even a date, right? Basically Sean Payton's dating.
I think I remember those days.
Yeah. Well, you never know, right? You get there, you have low expectations, and all of a sudden something happens. You make a connection. It could be a job interview. It could be a date, and things change. So I'm not completely ruling it out.
I've been married twice, so that's certainly true.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, he could get in that building and something happened, and he could change his mind. Sean Payton's a very impulsive guy. So what he's thinking now might change if he goes to Arizona, sits down, and all of a sudden that's what happened here in New Orleans. I mean, he didn't know jack about New Orleans.
What happened with Jim Mora?
He didn't know anything about Mickey Loomis. He connected with Mickey. He thought this was a kind of a clown organization. He wanted to go to Green Bay, and look what happened. So I wouldn't rule anything out, but I'll be surprised if the Bidwells are able to woo him over, just because I know the Bidwells' reputation, and also I know people have been trotting out what he said about Kyler Murray, but that was way back when Kyler Murray was coming out in the combine.
But it's not just that, Dunk. It's the fact that Kyler Murray's going to miss probably half the season.
I know, but I also think, like, Kyler Murray, his resume is not very to me, what he's done at the NFL level. Maybe Sean thinks he could go in there and fix him, and that's the kind of guy Peyton is. But you got a leadership issue with Kyler Murray. I mean, his teammates don't like him. I know one of the things when I worked on that Peyton Breeze book, Sean preached to me over and over the 11 commandments that Bill Parcells had for a quarterback. And I think number one was, we don't want a joker at quarterback. We need a field general, a guy that will lead a team into battle. That was number one. That isn't Kyler Murray. That's not him.
Didn't Bill Parcells win with Jeff Rutledge?
Yes, and Phil Simms. And I'm just saying he wants a guy that's serious and takes the job serious. And everything you hear about Kyler Murray, he doesn't study. He just goes out there and his talent. His teammates don't like him. That, to me, when people talk about the quarterback situation with Sean Payton, I don't think he's necessarily putting that as a high priority, but that becomes a high priority when you got a bad situation. And I think he would look at that as a bad situation.
Let's see. Hemi says, I'm not really sure he means by the Saints pulled the biggest scandal in NFL history. Sean Payton built a dynasty, then left, and they're about to get Saints picks. I don't necessarily think that it's going to happen this year. I mean, he may eventually get the Saints picks, but it's not necessarily going to happen this year. Uncle Big Nick saying, is Jerry Jones going to tell the Cowboys to throw the – no, he's not going to tell the Cowboys to throw the game.
Let me ask you this. So one of the things I've been seeing again on social media, as usual, I don't get this backlash that we've seen. It seems to have grown this year, much more so than last year when Sean left. This is about the time he left last year. There's a backlash that's grown in the fan base toward Peyton that I didn't anticipate, and I've heard this running narrative that he quit on the team. I don't know where that's come from. Again, it's an echo chamber on social media. I'm shocked that people feel that way. I mean,
I don't know that I've heard that.
Oh gosh, I mean, just go on my Twitter timeline. It's unbelievable. I pointed out.
I'll take your word for it.
Well, yeah, I pointed out that don't be surprised if he were to go somewhere like Houston that might surprise people.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And the reason I pointed that out is Sean Payton will look at that and say, "Man, I can go in there and turn that thing around."
100%.
And he'll look at it as like an opportunity, not as adversity. And people just jumped all over. Oh yeah, if he wanted, he quit on the Saints, so he obviously doesn't embrace adversity. And I just thought that's such a cheap shot, short-sighted way of looking at it. Sean Payton has taken this team through so much adversity over the years. He rebuilt the roster twice, and he didn't leave last year because the going was tough. He left for other reasons. but it had nothing to do with he couldn't have. If he was going to leave,
turns out
he would have left after Breeze retired. He would have just said, "I'm out of here." But he stayed another year and cobbled this team to 9 wins with a mash unit roster.
Yeah.
And that was amazing coaching that year.
I think the team this year, if you look at Andy Dalton is so much better than Trevor Siemian. I mean, yes. I give Andy Dalton grief, but he's like three levels higher than Trevor Siemian. Totally. Okay, I mean, it's not even close. So the fact that just goes to show, if the Saints had Andy Dalton last year, they would have been a playoff team.
No question.
Because working for Sean Payton is a lot different than working with – I think Andy Dalton would have fit into the mold of what they needed last year. This year, he didn't for several reasons that I'm not going to get into because we don't have time. But I agree. I think of the 3 teams that he's being rumored to me, the only one that makes sense is Houston because he can kind of go in there. They can draft Bryce Young he can
DJ
start
Stroud or somebody.
Or Stroud or whatever, and he can start that whole franchise over. They've got a stud running back, in my opinion, in Dameon Pierce.
Yes.
I think their O-line is okay. They've got decent receivers. Their defense, to me, isn't that far off, and they play in a terrible division. I think Houston
100%.
Could turn things around in a kind of hurry.
Number 12 overall pick, too.
Yes.
And they got like $150 million in cap space.
Yeah, I think if there's anywhere he's going to go, it's going to be to Houston. Now, then the Texans would have to turn around, and are they willing to give that 12th pick away? I don't know the answer to that. So, to me, of the 3 teams that are being mentioned, to me, that's the only one that makes sense. I don't see him going to Denver, not after what's going on with Russell Wilson and the fact that even if Russell Wilson isn't as bad as he was this year and they can change things, the fact that they're married to Russell Wilson for as long as they're married to him going into the future, I don't see him going to Denver. I mean, I'm not saying he's not going to Denver, but I think that would be a stretch.
The one thing I did hear about Denver is that he does like the owner there, the ownership situation. So that's one thing that would be a little bit appealing. But I think right now I would lean 60% that he doesn't coach somewhere. That's just my leaning on that. But once he walks in a building, everything could change very quickly. Right. So we'll see. But I don't think it's going to be a windfall of draft picks. I wrote that this week.
It's not going to be. I
think Mickey would love to get a first rounder. I think that's what he wants. And I think he could get a first rounder, but I don't think it's going to be multiple firsts.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know what people get in this pipe dream that the Saints going to be able to remake their team by whatever they get for Sean. It's not going to work that way. They'll be lucky if they get a first round pick and maybe like a 3rd or 4th the following year to go along with it. That's what's going to happen. You're not going to get this plethora of first round picks. That's not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. Coaches, it's just not going to happen. So
the fact that he's been out a year, I think, it tampers down the leverage the Saints have. Each year he stays out, the less valuable he is and the less leverage I think the Saints have. So I think by him sitting out 1 full year, it becomes even less advantageous for the Saints.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right, Dunk, give me the before we let you go. I know you got stuff to do this morning. Give me your 2 favorite games of the weekend. We have them all listed here on the screen and the times. What 2 games are you looking at the most, and what are you excited about?
Well, there's two games I really like. I really like the Giants against the Vikings. I think they're going to win the game straight up. I think Brian Daboll kind of threw that last game against the Eagles, and he's basically game plan for this game. They just played the Vikings about 3 weeks ago and pushed them all the way to the – I think
lost a 61-yard field goal.
61-yard field goal, right. I like the Giants in that game. I'm banking on Kirk Cousins to choke a little bit there. And then there's 2 other games I like. I like actually the Dolphins to cover. I don't know. I don't think they're going to win, but I think they can cover the spread in that game. I think it could be closer than people think. And the game I really like is I think the Jags-Chargers game goes over. I like the total in that game to go over. I think both those quarterbacks are going to have big days, and the weather's supposed to be good down in Jacksonville. And I just
61
feel like
and clear.
I know. And look, both of them have decent defenses, especially Jacksonville. I just think when you get in the playoffs, these quarterbacks cut it loose, and I could see a lot of big plays. I could even see some defensive big plays, which always lead to points. So I like that game to go over. But the game I like best is the Giants.
Jacksonville's defense is underrated.
I agree.
And I don't think the Chargers have played very well at all. I think
what I can see happening? Jacksonville gets up, gets a good 2-score lead, and then Herbert just starts winging it, and you end up with a higher scoring game because they're just going to ride his. And look, that guy's amazing. I mean, Justin Herbert, I can see why Sean Payton would be enamored with him. I mean, he is someone that's covered the league.
Oh, if Staley goes bye-bye, if Staley gets fired, there's no question that he would want to go there.
Yeah,
I mean, Los Angeles.
I don't think he's getting fired. I don't think he's getting fired.
But what if the Chargers have a chance to get a Sean Payton in there? Although they're pretty cheap. Those owners are pretty cheap.
That's what I'm saying. They're legendarily cheap.
Yeah.
So they'd have to write a check to make Brandon Staley go away, and I just don't think they're willing to do that.
These analytics coaches, and I know Zach Ewing disagrees with me. I can't stand these analytics. It's one of the reasons why I'm more willing to hold on to like a Dennis Allen because he coaches more like an old school guy. And I know I'm old, but these analytics coaches that use these cards to decide when to go for it on 4th down and when to go for it on 2 and never use feeling for anything or don't factor in what's going to happen to you if you don't get it on 4th down. They make me want to pound my head against a wall. I don't care if it's 67% and you're going to get it on 1st down. We don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen if you don't get it? You're going to be screwed. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, that's my rant of the day. All right.
Give me your picks because I trust your judgment.
I'm going to give you my picks. I will tell you this. I think that I agree that the Jags-Chargers game, that one might be the best one of the bunch. And not just because it's the closest spread. I'm so interested to see Doug Peterson and him now in the playoffs with another team. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is any good. Okay. I just don't. However, that being said, I think this Jacksonville team is going in the right direction. I think they're going to be really good as we go forward. They're clearly going to be the favorite to win the division next year. We'll see how that goes. But the game that I'm watching for, I agree with you with the Giants. The problem is that everybody, it seems like all the talking heads are all over the Giants, so that has me worried.
I didn't know that.
I have that in a teaser, okay? The game I'm looking for is the one we talked about earlier. I want to see how Tom Brady comes out and what could be his final game of his career against the Dallas team that I think doesn't play to the level of that they should play, because I think Dallas as a roster, I think if you go from top of the roster to the bottom of the roster, I think Dallas is the best team in football. I know it's scary to say that, but they should be up there and competing for Super Bowls, but they don't. So I want to see how they respond to playing like crap last week, I guess.
Well, look, here's the thing about Dallas. Jerry Jones is the general manager there. Jerry Jones is like almost a reincarnation of Al Davis. He cares about one thing, talent. He doesn't care, he's not just like Jeff Ireland and the Saints where they factor in character and discipline and those kind of things. That's why they end up being so undisciplined. They have a ton of talent, but they also got some knuckleheads over there. Remember, they're the team that went after Randy Gregory. And I've watched that guy line up off sides multiple times in his career. And that's what Mike McCarthy inherits. He has to deal with that. So everyone bags on Mike McCarthy when it's the personnel decisions that are made in Dallas. And that's what you put up with if you go to coach for Jerry Jones. It's what Sean Payton will put up with when he goes there. So the problem with them, they can beat anybody, but they can also lose to anybody. They remind me of like a much more talented version of the Hazlitt Saints that you just didn't know what you were going to get week to week. And I think if they come to play, which I think they will in this game because they're hearing a lot of the stuff like you talking, saying they might not win. And I think they get after Brady. Brady's going to have to get rid of the ball at 2.1 seconds or something.
But he does, though. He's the quickest release of any quarterback in the NFL.
Know that. Now, what I think is going to be interesting is, can they take advantage of Diggs on the outside, right? I mean, what's his name? I'm blanking on his name. It's not Diggs, is it? Trayvon
Are you
Diggs?
talking about the defensive back who with all the interceptions?
Yeah.
That is Diggs, yeah.
Okay. I just had a brain fart. He gambles, and Tom Brady knows that. Tom Brady's as good as anybody at setting a guy up. Can they deke him, go deep over his head? Because that guy will give up some plays too. Can they manufacture points that way? I don't see how they get points any other way. I mean, I don't know how they're going to.
Something's wrong with Micah Parsons, though. He hasn't been playing as well as he played the first half of the season.
I know, but they got Lawrence. I mean, they got some dudes on that front seven, man.
They do.
They can get after you. I mean, they're a big play defense. I mean, they make plays. They're the exact opposite of the Saints. I mean, they create turnovers, sacks. They're the kind of defense that can take one to the house, but they're aggressive. And Tom Brady's the kind of cat and mouse game quarterback that can set you up. So that to me is going to be fascinating to watch. But if they come with the intensity, I think they roll over Tampa Bay just because of sheer talent. I don't know how Tampa Bay protects Brady. I've seen that offensive line. They're a sieve.
I hope you're wrong because I got Tampa Bay in a teaser. They just need to not lose by more than 8.5. They can lose.
Well, I like that bet.
Okay, all right. Well, I will say this: I can rail on Mike McCarthy all I want, but Mike McCarthy is like Vince Lombardi compared to Todd Bowles. I mean, that little experiment that they're working on. When Tom Brady leaves, I don't think they're going to get rid of Todd Bowles, but they need to. I can't imagine that team without Tom Brady and with Tom Bowles. And look, there's a reason all the smack BS crap that was talked about Byron Leftwich, but how he wasn't getting a chance. There's a reason why he didn't get a chance. His coaching has been awful too. The entire coaching staff at Tampa Bay with that talent has been awful this year. Now, that doesn't judge them for an entire career. Maybe Byron Leftwich can be a coach somewhere, or maybe he's a viable offensive coordinator. But with the talent that this team has, for them to stink like they've stunk, I don't want him coaching my team. You can say whatever you want about me for saying that.
It is defense. I mean, again, man, the engine of an offense is the offensive line, and their offensive line is
terrible.
But I mean, they've been riddled with injuries, and I mean, it's just a mess. So
right. It was bad before they lost Kappa and Wirfs got hurt.
Yeah.
I mean,
so to me, like, I give them a little bit of a pass because if you don't have offensive line, you can't do anything. You can't pass or run.
Well, that's partly your problem. I understand you're just the coach and not the GM, but you need to say you need to be.
Well, I know, but they got hurt. I mean, a bunch of them got hurt. Like they were down at one point. They were down to like their fourth.
Before they got hurt, though, before Trenton Wirfs got hurt, they were not good. I mean,
before that, they had their center went down in training camp. They lost their starters.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see. Anyway,
we will see. But
anybody else, that's your big play.
Yes, and look, I agree with you. But I think that the only team that's going to cover a big spread this week is San Francisco. I think San Francisco is going to roll over Seattle. I just don't. I think Seattle's lucky to be in the playoffs. They had a little bit of divine intervention to even get in. They missed the field goal, and I think Detroit, San Francisco would have been a hell of a football game. I don't think Seattle, San Francisco is going to be. We'll see because it might rain there. But I agree with you that I think that Buffalo is going to be a closer game than people think. I think the emotion of DeMar Hamlin that they had last week, it's hard to replicate that 2 weeks in a row. Right. I think they're gonna be kind of down. I think they're going to kind of sleepwalk through that game. And I don't like Buffalo.
Win the game, but don't cover. That's what I think.
I agree. And then I also think the same. I think that Jim Harbaugh is going to have a really good game plan for the Bengals.
Agreed.
And I think that is going to be a low-scoring, physical kind of like the first time they played. I don't think Anthony Brown is going to win the game for the Ravens, but I think it's going to be like a 13-7 kind of game. I think it's going to be ugly. So that's what I'm looking for this weekend. And we'll see what happens with Giants and Vikes as well. I think that's going to be a really tight game. My best bet's coming up with Big Nick. So anybody who wants to can go and grab this podcast after we're done here. I'm going to go on to with Uncle Big Nick, and I'm going to add my monologue. Wherever you find your podcast, Dattitude will be there. I will have my best bets of the week. Hey, I'm 11-3 on teasers this week. That's my tease into my best bets because I have 2 of them as my best bets this week. Jeff Duncan, you don't have to worry about Saints. You can just kind of relax and watch TV at home this weekend.
Be refreshing to not have to worry about a game for a while, but it would have been better to be covering a playoff game, no doubt. But I'm not complaining.
Did you get your dong fong?
Yes, I did. And it's already gone. So.
It's already gone. What's the next king cake you're going to this week? I'm
going to try Bywater Bakery. That's the one I've heard is excellent, so I want to try it.
All right, that's what we're going to ask you next Friday as we go into the divisional round. We're going to talk about that along with a lot of other things. We'll see you next Friday, my friend.
All right, take care, buddy. Have a good weekend.
All right, everybody, and we thank you for joining us again every Friday. It's usually at 9:15. We had to do it at 8:15 this week. but we hope you can join us next week as we'll be talking about the divisional round, and I'm sure the New Orleans Saints as well. Thank you for joining Dattitude. Everybody have a great weekend. We will see you next Friday.